Good evening and welcome to Nanaimo, everyone. Being host city to this third Cascadia Poetry Festival is a great honour for Nanaimo. When one thinks of Nanaimo, the word poetry doesn't immediately spring to mind. One thinks coal, mines, harbour, hub city, but never sonnets. And David Fraser and his team at Wordstorm have done splendidly in recent years to draw the Nanaimo poetry community together by encouraging young poets and bringing noted poets to Nanaimo to read their writings, and of course helping bring this festival here too. The fact that the city now has a poet laureate may be viewed as a token gesture, but that would be wrong. Even the most jaded councillor is now aware that poetry counts when it comes to ledgering a healthy community. Since my past year has, I have a 3-year term, since my past year has been focused on poetry and the creative process, a number of my poems have been about me fussing this way and that, about what on earth we are all doing most of our lives. That is, putting pen to paper to write creatively. Whether our words can be attributed to the gods, to the muses, or to our own brilliance seems to be a matter of dispute. Certainly, the activity of our neurons and synapses provides some sort of highway for our words. But maybe it's a genetic flaw that allows us to link the unusual in our metaphors and jump chasms to make our fresh connections. Anyway, here to welcome you all to Nanaimo are 2 small poems. The first concerns me fretting, wondering and wondering about the creative process. Spring fever. Another rainy day on the west coast, and I'm requested to write an upbeat poem, full of the promise of spring, the flowing from the thaw. But words are not flowing from my pen, which stumbles awkwardly across the page, wanting to note down the weight of a sad body, the strictures of an aging mind. I seize the pen firmly and strike across its pathetic beginnings of a new poem. Now I tell it, now write joyful and greening and sprouting, and link them together in some sparkling fresh way. And for a coder, note that old age brings pluses and minuses into balance, and that even the moss on a west coast roof can harbour small, lively insects. Thank you. The second poem was supposed to be my welcoming poem to you all, but when I sat down to write, my muse, ever contrary, sent me one that is more like speeding you on your way. Well, as you all know, one takes what one can get from the muse, so here's my welcoming poem, Nanaimo Bound. Hub City we're called, and more people come to Nanaimo by ferry, plane, boat or car, and leave Nanaimo by similar methods in a week than actually live here. Just think of that. It's as if a whole town arrived and departed within days, leaving a few plastic cups and foam clamshells on the sidewalks. Supposing we could hold them midway between arrival and departure, persuade them to stay, settle down, rent a condo, send their kids to school, buy season tickets at the Port Theatre. We'd have doubled the town in no time. But let's not even think of it. Let's hurry them on their way and bid them a speedy adieu, along with a suggestion that they make a quick stop at a downtown restaurant to drop some money into the economy as they pass through. I'm a small city girl, comfy with small houses, local stores, and familiar faces. Even in her imagination, a small city girl needs to keep her a small city small. Thank you.
That was Naomi Beth Walken, Nanaimo's first poet laureate. We're now going to have a short tribute to poet and friend Peter Culley, who would have been here this weekend but suddenly passed away last week. And to hold the tribute, please welcome Kim Goldberg.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. One of the first people I met and one of the first friends I made when I moved to Nanaimo in the late 1970s was, in fact, Peter Culley. He was 18 years old and I was 22, and we each worked, we had a job at the Nanaimo Museum in the darkroom restoring archival photos of the city. Hundreds and hundreds of photos that were torn, yellowed, sepia-toned, ripped, creased, stained, that people had been saving and would bring into the museum in shoe boxes and photo albums that they had squirreled away in dusty closets and attics for years. They brought them in, we reshot them so that we could get a new negative of these old images, and then in the dark room, using archival processing, we made a good quality black and white print of each of these and filed them. So even as a teenager, Peter had this abiding interest and commitment to photography and to local history and to working class culture. And he understood, even then, in such early years, he understood the importance of doing everything possible to preserve this material and to preserve this part of our existence and our culture, not let it slip away completely in the wash of artificiality and shopping malls and plastic that is otherwise engulfing us then as well as now. So he understood this even at age 18. He was also a poet even then. 3 years later, when he was 21 years old, he published his first volume of poetry that was titled, not surprisingly, 21. That was published by Oolican Books. Peter is known to people as many things, not just a poet. He's certainly known as a photographer as well as an art critic and writer about art. People who know Peter primarily from Facebook or from his blog will actually perhaps not even realize he's a poet. They'll think he's a photographer because that's almost entirely what he would publish and post to Facebook and his blog, images with no text whatsoever. I, however, knew Peter primarily as a poet, and Peter is included, of course, he's probably most well known as a poet for his Hammertown trilogy of books, all of which have been published by New Star Books. Pete is also in the anthology that we're going to be launching tonight, Make It True, the anthology of 89 poets from the Cascadian bioregion, and Pete was slated to read tonight before his very untimely death just 3 weeks ago at the age of 56. There's been such an outpouring on social media of memories about Peter and recollections of him that it seemed very important to us here at the festival that we reserve some time right at the beginning of this evening to really acknowledge his presence. He's still with us after all. He's in the anthology that we're going to be launching tonight, so he's very much here in the room. And so we wanted to have some means to really formally remember him here before we launch the anthology. We're going to have 3 people who knew him, who were friends of his, each say a few words either about Peter or a few words of Peter's in the form of his poetry. We'll be hearing from Rolf Maurer, Renée Saklikar, and George Stanley. First up will be Pete's longtime friend and publisher, Rolf Maurer of New Star Books.
Good evening. It is both an honor and distressing to be here, but we are here. I'd like to acknowledge quickly Pete's wife and life partner, Daphne, who's here tonight, and also his daughter-in-law, Kathy. They're in the front row. Music is not about self-expression. Self-expression is boring and hideous and pretty much pointless and really the bane of the 20th century. Art is not about self-expression. Art is about social expression, a communal intercourse. The purpose of art is to upbuild the community. The intent is the sharing of hopes and dreams and fears. Whether that accomplishes something by the fact of it is another question, but that's not the intent. The speaker of those lines is a musician, David Thomas, which explains the lumpy syntax at times, but there is a clear thought that shines through, and I do thank Alex Vardy of the Georgia Strait for noticing that and writing down what David Thomas said back in 1993. David Thomas was the leader of a band called Père Ubu, and interestingly, in 1989, Père Ubu released an album called Cloudland. And Cloudland was the name that Peter had given a long poem that finishes the book 21 10 years previously. The poem, incidentally, is dedicated to George Stanley, and the last section of the poem is dedicated to Daphne Samuel. And like a lot of people here, because I get Facebook on my computer too, I know that when a lot of people heard this news, they reached for a Peter Culley book and read it, and a lot of people posted passages that resonated with him. And the one that jumped out at me was a passage in this book 21. It was right towards the end of it. It jumped out at me for a number of reasons. One of it is because for those of you who are somewhat familiar with this very scarce book, it has a very different tone from Peter's later work. And a lot of people, there's a kind of a myth that's developed that Peter disowned that book somehow, and that's not quite the truth. What really happened is, more or less as that book was going to the printer, he had reached a kind of a crossroads in his own artistic practice, and he had become a very different kind of a poet. Specifically, what he had moved away from was what I think of as the private eye, the first-person eye of his earlier poetry, and adopted what would become the dominant position of all of his later work, which I have come to call the camera eye, although it's important to notice that it also included other senses, including taste, smell, sound. The other reason, however, that this piece jumped out at me was because of a conversation that Peter and I had been having, one of the threads over the many years that we've been talking, which was about editing. And we had some differing ideas about that. Now, I'm not talking about this specific line editing, but what I have just in the last few weeks developed the term brutalist editing, where you take whole pieces of work, more or less intact, and move them around. Or cropping would be an example of that. Peter was a photographer, was not at ease with cropping. He was critical when I did it, and he thought that there was something kind of weak about it, and he didn't see it as part of his own practice. And so I thought that when I saw this passage at the end of this longer poem called Cloudland, I wanted to ask him what he would make of what occurred to me, because what happened when you took, not the whole, but most of this poem, cut off basically about the last 14 lines, right in the middle of the line, and transposed it into a different context 35 years later, you end up with Peter, I think, writing a very different poem than he thought he was writing back in 1979, this would have been. I awoke, my hand on the cat's pregnant belly, gray light falling through a house filled with warm creatures, and blessed as I am with their discriminate love, I smoke the last cigarette, stare disconsolately out from the edge of the bed through stained glass at the sky, at the blue and red clouds full of rain. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Rolf. Next up is Pete's friend and poetry colleague, Renée Saklikar. Renée?
Facebook, July 13th, 2013. SkyTrain to Surrey. This morning, on the way to South Bank Writers Program, platform reading, Columbia to Surrey City Centre. Peter Culley's Briggs and Stratton in my hand. Conversation. Are you really reading a book about lawnmower engines? A pleasant man talks to me with entheos about machines. Turns out he is an award-winning BCIT instructor. Mama Roo. At the corner store, the Protestant Santeria of the lottery logos, fake foxing against a gold rush font, the leprechaun's derby overflows. A yellow cord marks off the liquor store after 11. Outside, courtesy of the smoke from Burns Bog, the moon trails a gambler's beard. A kettle of coins rattles inside the aqua tunnel under Highway 1, illuminates the figure 8. I inscribed on a whim on the slope outside the Cranberry Fire Hall. Or it could be the pimp juice sticker the PepsiCo rep slapped near the entrance, or the ice cube with wings and a Grecian profile, loyal to the old regime, where the word cold came wreathed in beads of sweat, and every word unashamedly itself, like those farmers in Emerson who planted themselves last, pulling the earth over themselves like an old quilt. It's for Daphne.
Thank you, Renée.
Thank you for that, Renée. And we'll conclude our tribute to Peter Culley by hearing from Pete's longtime friend, colleague, and one of the 4 editors on the anthology we're celebrating tonight, George Stanley.
Thank you, Kim. It was very sad news to hear that Peter had died a couple of weeks ago. I have admired and been astonished at times by his poetry since I first met him when he and his friend Kevin Davies arrived in I often say San Francisco instead of Vancouver, in Vancouver in the late 1970s. Peter was, I would say, a difficult poet. I wouldn't say he was obscure, but difficult because of the tremendous range of his reference. It runs from botany to jazz to aviation to geology and back. And not only that, but that his poetry is not in any way paraphrasable. I think it's true what Rolf Maurer just said, that it is a form of social expression, so that one feels in the poem that the society itself is attempting to speak in contradictory voices. I'm going to read, he dedicated a poem to me, a long poem, The Inland Empire. It's in 7 parts. I'm going to read the first part of part 1 and then all of part 2. And in this first part, we remember not only Peter, but also another poet whom we lost a couple of years back, and that is Billy Little, whose nom de plume was Zonko. So I have to imitate Billy Little's voice. The weak solder of solidarity, Zonko's "Hang the Socreds" in his best Queens in Victoria, under the gaze of Victoria, who looks like a young Mary Todd. I tried to find who Peter was referring to by Mary Todd. There is a Canadian historical novelist living in Toronto who happens to have graduated from Queen's University, so there is a connection here between Billy Little coming from Queens, New York, and Victoria, and Mary Todd. Or a bomb-wielding Avignon Pope under the gaze of the rank and file, who can't wait for Jack Monroe to come out of the snow to get them off the hook and back to Nanaimo. And then this is in italics. When the poets start, it's time to leave. And this is part 2. This snowball smells like fish. And down the same railroad cut, which carries the ascending whine and keening rumble of traffic sometimes, bacon, smokes, coffee, acetone, pig shit, cow shit, frying chicken, if less of the burger onion startup combo casserole than years since, weed, the horse farm goat, always the greenwood smoke at the bottom of the bowl. Yellowed penguin pages, ordinary leaves of Don Allen. Failing transmissions from off-island, subject to frequency modulation and infant theft. The last ethered sunlight of grade 11. A slice of lemon pound cake from which the rind had been removed. Morse code from a coffin. Idea of North, Protestant North, no California lemons, bare-knuckle bonhomie, pubs heated by sweat and breath and pickled egg farts, terry cloth tonsure, cards till daybreak, a winter without hugs or drugs, hockey fights and hockey kisses, the rolling gray scale of a cheap TV into which the test pattern has been burned, conditional recognition, not so much as a poet as one marked off as that injured aldermanic raven walking bent through the snow and toward the fence with an entitled eye to the point of death. Thank you.
Thank you so much, George, and thank you, Kim. And so we dedicate the launch of the book tonight to Peter. So here is this amazing anthology with 4 editors. Wow, I can't imagine how that went. I co-edited an anthology with one other person. It was sometimes a little bit of a boxing match. So. Paul Nelson, who's one of the 4 editors, has this to say. Ultimately, the best of the poems herein have an exactness of naming and imagery, the light of the mind, Diane de Prima recognized as intellectus, along with the wildness of the mind Charles Olson would suggest was a use of speech at its least careless and least logical. To live here as if we again venerate this place and all its marvelous interconnected systems. That's to live in Cascadia. So that's Paul Nelson. So we have 6 readers. We are going to, perhaps I will tell you who the readers are going to be before I introduce the first one. Christine Leclerc, who's sitting over here. Barry McKinnon, who's sitting over here. Renée Saklikar, who's right here. Christine Lowthar. George Stanley and Sharon Thesen will be our readers tonight. And we begin with Christine Leclerc. Christine is a Vancouver-based author and activist. She is the author of Counterfeit and Oily Wood, as well as being an editor of the N-Pipe line, 70,000 plus kilometers of poetry written in resistance to the Northern Gateway Pipeline proposal. Leclerc is a University of British Columbia Creative Writing Program graduate whose poetry, fiction, and essays have appeared internationally. She is a communications manager by day and a poet and activist by night. Please welcome Christine Leclerc.
you, Yvonne, for the great introduction, and thanks for everyone who read in honor of Peter just now. I'll admit I never met Peter, but it's been a pleasure to get to know some of his work over the years, and I also lost a family member quite suddenly this spring, and I know it can be very shocking, and a lot of other emotions that are hard to express so close to the event. So in any case, I'll dedicate this reading to Peter. This chapbook, Oily Wood, is a community-based poem. And so I'll just share a little bit before I read from it. It was a poem that was developed through several community workshops that were held in Vancouver in 2012, and also combines research that I did visiting 12 beaches around the Burrard Inlet, so Vancouver, North Vancouver, West Vancouver, all around the inlet, Burnaby, etc. And I had a chance to just really chat with the other folks who were at the beach and talk about why they were at the beach, why they loved the beach, and also what they thought about the tar sands tanker traffic that was going through the inlet that we all lived around. And so this poem is also dedicated to the collaborators, and I will read the first 6 sections. 1. We listen to water. We go float in it. The ocean makes us giggle. We giggle when we're in it. But no matter how advocacy demands our sketches, the future is far from shapeless, already flush with months, minutes, and here's something. Assholes. It has power, movements, press releases, and it's full of soundtracks to make you feel you've just seen a movie, like your life is something hard to leave, like a supertanker. Interim service begins on Mid-Continent Express Pipeline. Kinder Morgan announces open season for crude oil shipments on Cochin Pipeline. Louisiana Pipeline in service. Rockies Express Pipeline begins service on Rex East. Kinder Morgan completes first commercial shipment of biodiesel in U.S. Linger on Plantation Pipeline. 2. There are many ways to feel, and the way to feel doesn't matter exactly. Kinder Morgan announces closing of Makeout. El Paso acquires more interest in Colorado Interstate. Fish on Rocks. Gas Company. Kinder Morgan and Energy Transfer place all of Mid-Continent Express Pipeline into service. Kinder Morgan throws sticks to acquire gas trading assets from Crosstex. Kinder Morgan begins biodiesel shipments for our doggies on Oregon Pipeline. 3. About a mine site, pit nothing power, watching tractors build moats to keep us from running for miles through bitumen and tailings lakes crossing high voltage lines obvious as fog drizzle. To keep us from stopping anything more which was little but televised, so something of trouble. It's not a thing to write about from the ground, from a helicopter maybe, or a big city building with satellites on the rock skip roof. Especially if you're paid to do it, you can begin to say things that make the story about something other than people in yet another mode of gasping. Kinder Morgan completes natural gas acquisition, receives PHMSA authorization to operate new pipelines, honored by EPA for participating in Natural Gas Star program. Last leg of Rockies Express Pipeline completed, all 1,679 miles in service. Kinder Morgan and Capano Energy announced new Eagle Ford Shale Pipeline project. El Paso to present Starshot at RBC Capital Markets MLP conference. Kinder Morgan promotes natural gas executives. Kinder Morgan announces closing of underwriters' over-allotment option. El Paso expects continued growth. 4. Some days blend into each other, but not in a monotonous way. They blend in a luxurious, splendid, magnificent way. Dragged toes through wet sand, in a way that makes you feel like your life is an amazing beachcomb movie. I never get bored at the beach. I like to come with things to do. Often I don't do them at all and just lie there. We talk, but we also just lie there in silence a lot. Kinder Morgan announces $195 million acquisition and new ethanol venture, announces $98 million terminals acquisition. El Paso acquires majority interest in Elba Island LNG terminal and Elba Express pipeline offers. Stand into your waist and move your arms so you make it look like you're doing something. $425 million in senior notes. 5. There's a company called Kinder Morgan, and one of the pipelines it owns is called the Trans Mountain Pipeline. It's a pipeline that goes from the tar sands to Burnaby. Terracin Gas used to own it, and it didn't always carry tar sands product. Now tar, drift, sands is being shipped in tankers through the Burrard Inlet. This is the only place where tar sands is being shipped in tankers, and Kinder Morgan started shipping it without public consultation. Now they're consulting on adding capacity to the Trans Mountain. Sometimes Kinder Morgan calls it an expansion project, sometimes a twinning. If you look at a map, you'll see lots of pipeline that isn't there in the secure bones world yet. Kinder Morgan, so much sand in your hair, won't take the proposal away, even if it's what mayors, First Nations, and people say. Kinder Morgan to buy half of Haynesville Shale midstream operation for $875 million. SFPP settles for great cases, offers quick and efficient solution to move Marcellus NGLs to market. El Paso will present NAPTP MLP Annual Investor Conference. Kinder Morgan and Capano execute agreements for Eagle Ford Shale joint venture. Kinder Morgan closes on joint venture with ProHawk in Haynesville Shale. Kinder Morgan responds to Enbridge's filing of its Northern Gateway Pipeline project, announces the sound of paddles. Non-binding open season for moving NGLs from Marcellus. El Paso agrees to acquire more interest in Southern Natural Gas Company from El Paso Corporation, announces $100 million senior notes offering, announces pricing of $110 million debt offering. Kinder Morgan enters new $2 billion credit facility, announces exercise of underwriters' option to buy more common units and acquisition of more interest in Southern Natural Gas Company. And finally, 6. I love the slope of the land versus the flatness of water. I love to think about how the water covers the land we call water. I don't know why, but I always think about that. How the water stays flat and the earth slopes down below it. I love how it connects. How the ocean could go up in smoke. Kinder Morgan grows natural gas treating. Ooh hoo hoo. Business in acquisition of gas chill. El Paso to present at Oppenheimer 5th Annual Industrial Conference. Capillary mappings. Thank you very much.
That was Christine Leclerc. Thank you, Christine. Our next reader is Barry McKinnon. Barry McKinnon was born in Calgary, Alberta. His collection, That was nominated for the Governor General's Award for Poetry. Pulp Log was the winner of the Dorothy Livesay Poetry Award and the BC Book Award. And Arrhythmia, which he spoke of earlier today, was the winner of the B.P. Nicol Chapbook Award. Barry is one of the 4 editors of Make It True. Please welcome Barry McKinnon.
Is this light sort of? Besides having arrhythmia, I'm blind. Almost. I met Peter with, I was at a beer with Myron Makepeace, who's been a wonderful young musician who I met in 1975. And it was Myron and Peter Culley and Kevin Davies where I thought, these kids coming from Nanaimo, this is amazing, because they were so bright. And they were a little bit younger than I was, but they'd still sneak into the Occidental for a beer, so there we go. I've been living south a lot. And I've been writing a sequence called Gone South, and I want to dedicate this to Paul Nelson, who's probably written the most, well, it's embarrassingly insightful. I mean, he read this poem and wrote an essay about it, and I was just absolutely amazed at what he was seeing. It's kind of what I was trying to write, so, you know, there's a careful reader, as they say. It starts with just going to Wikipedia. You know, what do? You gotta say something about Gone South. What does that mean? So here's one definition. This expression is generally thought to allude to compasses and two-dimensional maps where north is up and south is down. However, among some Native Americans, the term was a euphemism for dying, and possibly this sense led to the present usage. Also, head south, take a turn south, go south, to disappear, fail by or as it by vanishing, to abscond with money, loot, underworld, to cheat, especially to cheat at cards, to lessen, diminish, probably from the notation of disappearing south of the border to Texas or to the Mexican border, to escape legal pursuit and responsibility, probably reinforced by the widespread Native American belief that the soul after death travels to the south, attested in American colonial writing from the middle 1700s. Quote, gone to Texas, absconded, is found by 1839. So, first poem is called In Arizona. In Arizona, the desert, weather within weather, no discernible season, sense of its ancient growth. The sequoia, tree, names I don't know, the desert sand's name or taxonomy, but for this little burst, minute, pink, to cactus red buds, to take as measure. What was or is it in the temporality does not need us, nor without a mind need itself. Thus, it's worse than the puzzle it appears, the desert. No matter the temperature, cold sun stings, this no meaning as is with any sensation being only itself in the same condition, the desert. Looking at an interior, not yourself exactly, but a vast expanse that if you entered, would you be you? This was its fear, your fear, all fear, in whatever risk one or it takes. Going north in Arizona, get back to the literal as communication. Was in a lineup at Bash's with a young man ahead, as my dad once said, whose head fell into a tackle box. Nose rings, earrings, tattoos, skateboard pants, runners with special meanings, and a toddler. Not the toddler, but he was packing a gun, exposed, Arizona law. My sense, to put the groceries down and leave the provocation of threat and trouble. Pat kid's head, blam. Have a nice day, blam. Whatever one could say, taken the wrong way. No caring in this separation. Otherwise, the bartender at the Sultanas in Williams, Arizona stiffed me for 15 bucks. I hesitate to say America in quotes when, in all sense the largesse, unless I be taken fooled by a more subtle commerce training that leads to belief of total sincerity. Too drunk anyway, and missed Petey the dog as the reason, not the Grand Canyon, to see him again, 100 pounds on the pooled room, table and floor. And the quotidian 35-buck motel and owner Elton, and the line I use, I like you, as a way to disarm the possibilities of its opposite. At the south end of the Grand Canyon, the drop 1 mile down, fear starts. I couldn't look, went into the forest, stumbling, told me nothing more than it did in Arizona. I can't time myself. Is that like 3 minutes? Or? And then in the desert, it started kind of, not spooking me out, but I'd walk the dog every day for a couple of hours, and these lines started coming at me, and I was amazed at the power of this new muse. To see this desert ringed by what we sense removes it all, yet the coagulations of its forest alive as context for its various light and range of temperatures, temperaments. Sans solitude, sans meaning, become dust. I am in a desert, more a field, it's dirt, a valley, harrowed, brown, parched, circled, mountains, distant, brown, blurred, boulders, cut back, drop sky, intensity, blue, footprints, trail. Beauty cannot make it anything else. Hammock to surprise into high desert, mindless, the mind undescribed by elements that form elements and meaning, sun and literal, no cloud, bush, measures wind, dust way off to a horizon south to Mexico, funnels, trails go where? The desert. What failing reveals makes closer the sun, the blanched air to shadow textures and desert vectors, these mountains folding in mute desert light. The characteristic suffering humans in relation to this basin, valley, heat bowl, persistent as the force that rejects them. The desert lives like water. Nothing becomes another thing. Body and mind in context, indistinguishable from what defines it, gone south. Does anybody have any water? I went to get a cup and
Right there.
oh, yeah. Okay, one more. I don't know if anybody's ever been to a place called Slab City. It's in Southern California near the Salton Sea. It's a place with about anywhere from 300 to 1,500 hobos. It's a hobo camp. And my son and I went and stayed there for quite a while off and on. And I never felt more at home than anywhere else I've ever been. It was an amazing experience. And he's making a documentary, and I said, well, you know, as your father, I should collaborate with you. So I wrote this poem, and he said, man, they won't understand it. You got to be there to get this thing, you know. So, Slab City. Google it. You'll see this landscape that I'm, you know, trying to describe here, and some of the people. Slab City. Freedom, unquote, is tolerance, or so I thought, in Slab City, in the range of outliers, hobos, patriots, artists, tourists, military guys in camel, snowbirds, the neo-whats, thus the guns, blasts at night into the dark, hot air. No sense we're not there or welcome to a measure of who we are, drawn to some sense of the end of the earth and its ragged, rigged community, a language, human typos. Papa Jimmy De Silva, to survive, greets all with, God bless, I love you, man, then got a beer. Poverty, the hell of any desert, a place, a space marked out, tires, hubcaps, forms of grabbage, garbage, as set limits versus trespass, which asks, America, unquote, free sans expectations. Is the free money useless? A price more so nonetheless. All is gone, I thought, thus necessary to inhabit it as time only, a kind of oblivion. It's all so blue, Tyler said, emerging from the hole. Paul, it's all blue, man. Sky and sea, yes, yes. Colors, the primary desert in the desert morning heat. Detritus, us in the infrastructure when none else appears. Shiny, kid from Minneapolis, of the tree, the grass, the sand, he asked to be here. Notes, breakfast in Nyland. No man is an island unto himself, I joke. Everything, 25 bucks. Get to Brawley, take shit in Walmart, then head east to Oasis Hot Pool, Canals Water, the drought. Eddie with a stiffy, caretaker, the pool leering. Who not to see such female human flesh? Tess, Amy, follow us back to Slab. Sense of safe with us, being aligned with what seems to be. Sense of don't fucking mess with me. The ethos, Sheriff's drive on through. What is reality? Only the figment of the imagination as it seeks itself? The slab, simpler or more complex than what sociology I can muster? Degrees of heat, the diminishment, measure. No coffee in proximity. Dennis then brings pot and cups, oranges, beer, all at hand. Kid from Hole, Tyler, shoeless. Then a pair appears. Range music, some of the shits, salvaged by sincerity, energy. Oh, the boldness of those who don't care. What a good dog's life beneath the decibels, the noise of guns and traffic, the great rooster, fog dog horn who wakes us, then barking dogs, then gas engines, then human clanking. The sun is up. Do people die here? I've heard ambulances at night. Or in the opposite, I ask, is sex necessary? And no one seems to get the joke. Apparently not. Therefore, the explained end of the world, etc. Here or not here, a question in what guise and sense of one's being. Premature, the dirt that covers us, heavy in its portent, until something happens as it does here in Slab City. Clear elements that no mistake makes less to curse at the slab. No escape of exit is also entrance. Reality ahead. It is a sense simultaneous that no one connects, thus becomes connection. Thus the attempt all the more to sense the blue, dark, wordless desert, the disparate selves gathered here. So that's me in Hobos.
That was Barry McKinnon, thank you. I loved the blue, dark, wordless deserts, great. Our next reader is Renée Sorojini Saklikar. I dared myself to not screw it up. Renée writes The Canada Project, a lifelong poem chronicle that includes poetry, fiction, and essays. Work from the Canada Project appears in literary journals, newspapers, and anthologies. The first completed series from the Canada Project is a book-length poem titled Children of Air India, which was published by Nightwood Editions in 2013, about the bombing of Air India Flight 182. This collection, Children of Air Canada, was shortlisted for the Dorothy Livesey Prize in 2014. Please welcome Renée.
Great turnout. So, Cascadia. I'd like you to think about what's in Cascadia and what's outside Cascadia, if you would, while I'm reading. I was born in India, and I've lived across Canada and I've spent quite a bit of my growing up years in New Westminster. I see a lot of relationships, I think, between New Westminster and Nanaimo. So I'm honored to have 3 poems in this gorgeous anthology. I'm just going to read 2 of them. So this is Carnarvon Street Lament. Oh, I like the fog-bound morning hours when light casts a shadow on my raggedy sweater and shoes, 'cause I'm now what I always knew I'd be, a raggedy woman just off the streets. Oh, I sing in my veins a trap noise, not let to the air, 'cause I'm a raggedy girl, gone home from high towers to the ground. Oh, watch me, that's where I'll be, learning to spin wool, to plant carrots in the dark soil. Oh, I pound my feet neath the big box towers, driven from road to road. I'm the raggedy one, I'm claiming the moon. Oh, the stars, the sun. And I end with a fragment of a sequence from my book, Children of Air India. It's written as a kind of gesture to an Indian form, the raga. And in the book, it's called a morning raga for Paldi, the old lumber town outside of Duncan. But I'm going to make it an evening raga for us, right? The title of the poem is Exhibit, After-Time Accompaniment, Evening Raga for Paldi, in the woods outside Duncan, British Columbia. And there are mountains, and there is water. And there is that refrain that is for this morning's journey by ferry boat, or evening's journey by ferry boat. Such snippets as will be found. Saw you, whom my soul loves, I say to the night watchman in a Horseshoe Bay coffee shop, the words about the village Paldi outside Duncan. Saw you, whom my soul loves. There are the mountains and water and words. There are no expectations of meeting. Meet the ferry, Horseshoe Bay to Nanaimo, up island. And there is sureness. There will be a meeting. There are not facts to suggest it. Sing this journey, Cowichan Valley. Now the ferry boat carries this raga. Now it is sailing. There are the names, bring them, insert Punjabi. There are the places, this is the time and after, June 23rd, 1985. Insert all dialects and languages, spoken and dreamt and worked and plowed and mined and dug and timbered. There is a body on a ferry boat. Sing! Queen of Oak Bay to Nanaimo, replication of a journey. Bomb maker, poem maker. Name the name of the man driven to. Name who boarded that ferry boat. Name the history of the bay and its waters cry, come, tika, 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 o toto toy. Saw you him who do the deed? In his path, this replication, and know his end, and know his end. It is jail, it is obliteration, it is fragments. His ways and means a bombing. This is an evening raga, mountains, water. This is a sailing to Nanaimo on the Queen of Oak Bay.
That was Renée, Saklikar. Christine Lowthar is the author of Born Out of This, published by Caitlin Press in 2014 and shortlisted for a BC Book Award this year. Also, New Power, My Nature, and Half-Blood Poems. She is co-editor and co-author of Writing the West Coast in Love with Place, published by Ronsdale Press, and Living Artfully, Reflections from the Far West Coast, published by the Key Publishing House. Christine lives in Clayoquot Sound on Vancouver Island. Please welcome her.
Thank you. I'm sorry for your loss. And I didn't know him. And it's a real honor to be a part of this anthology and a complete thrill to be here. And those are really hard acts to follow. This poem was written as an eventual response to the oil plume explosion that happened in Florida 5 years ago. And it's a poem in two voices, the voice of a human and the voice of the oil. Pondering British Petroleum in Florida. Oil has been drilled. It spills all. The numbers soar, unlike the birds anymore. 300 sea turtles, shells slick under my caress. Hatching season. Inside thousands of hatchling turtles, their organs marinate in me. According to the anchorman, only one blackened dolphin. Water columns stifled with the blob, dog walker's shoreline, a killing field. Dreams of ruined bodies covering planes, cars, and boats coast to coast. Cormorants and herons draped, oozing over my prized Suzuki four-stroke outboard. Facebook friends post images for the nightmare files. Some nameless seabird on its back, swirling in tar, black feet in the air. Because the anchorman said only nothing for 3 weeks while we waited, volunteers were turned away unless willing to sign contracts with the oil company. Time to get off the grid, go home, lower the motor, check its oil carefully without dripping, start ignition, replace guilt with responsibility, commit to healing old injuries, enough to take up paddling again. Think about attaching a sail. Imagine joining covert cleanup crews, the swing of the shovel, triumph and despair with every capture rescue, a kind of pleading with every pull on the rake. I hold you in the palm of my black hand. A planet's blood belongs buried, embedded in rock, soothing friction between fossils. You think I wanted release into this fluidic expanse of salt. Yet I like being here, the heaviness almost gone. I move and there is light above me. Out my window, the resident merganser and her 7 ducklings pass, a clean line of serenity. Begin typing. And then I'm going to read one more poem. I didn't know how to respond to that oil spill. I never know how to respond to oil spills. And so I write poems. Go figure. Thanks. I read this one earlier during the panel. New Channel Good Advice. It's about living in Clayoquot Sound on Leclerc, traditional territory where I have a float house. I've been told it's time to decolonize my mind, that all the places I love carry the wrong rhymes. Lone Cone, Frank Island, Catface, Colnet. Dubbed by and for missionaries, Kingdom Come, imposing replacement. Xixwatsats, Shitapi, Wanashus, Hilthhuhis. More than pretty names, words that come up out of the ground as the loon learns his song from the lake. Try to cover a mountain in concrete? Language keeps emerging, the planet speaking its green poems. The kind of petrifaction in pavement. The newcomers postpone mortality, preserve everything in hard gray, stop death by spreading it, lacks logic. Listen for green, learn the names. I've been advised not to study French or Spanish, rather to stand still, make roots from words, take in the language of the place I've made my home. Many, many thanks.
That was Christine Adler. Check out her book, her new book. Our next reader is George Stanley. He was active on the San Francisco poetry scene in the 1960s and moved to British Columbia in 1971. George has published 9 books of poetry as well as several chapbooks, while also teaching English for 26 years in BC community colleges. He is now retired and living in Vancouver. His most recent books are Vancouver, a Poem, After Desire, and North of California Street, which is his selected, all from New Star Books of Vancouver. George is another of the 4 editors of this anthology. Please welcome George Stanley.
Thank you very much. I'll read 3 poems. The first one is from a collection called Seniors. Let me quote the title poem of Seniors. It's only 3 lines, and you won't understand it if you're under 65. Seniors know everything. Correction, each senior knows everything. The others don't want to hear about it. Waiting for a moment, the seniors in their apartments at this hour, late afternoon, the horizon of meaning is just inside the living room window. They don't know what kind of moment they're waiting for, or they could go out and make it for themselves. They could move freely about in the middle distance. They have no motives. They remember having a choice of motives, maybe even acting on unacknowledged motives, moving here and there like a thoughtless baby. Now they have no motives, but are still waiting for a moment. They know there will be the right moment, the right time. When the first senior centers began to appear, I thought that was such crap. Looking at the senior center at Aquatic Park, I thought, my father is an old person, an old man, not a senior. There is no such thing as a senior. But now I'm a senior. I mourn Bruno Klingner, Andy's dad, who died last week at 91. When Bruno was 70, Andy suggested he might spend some time at the Happy Gang Center. Bruno said, I don't want to be around a bunch of old people. Wild birds fly over the Fraser Valley. Some think they bring avian flu. Thousands of chickens burned in big incinerators on the factory farms or trucked to be burned in Princeton. Not here, not there, but oh yes, here, there. 600 slot machines will be installed at the Plaza of Nations. I put the West Ender in the recycling bag, just like my father, finish the paper and put it in the stack, keep every flat space empty, the floor, the coffee table cleared, so the revolving light, looking for a moment, won't hit any obstacle, any undone thing, but can look straight ahead to love or death. This is a poem translated from Charles Baudelaire, so it's taking place in Paris in the 1860s as well as in Vancouver at present. It's called Crowds. Not everyone can take a bath in a crowd. Only the one a fairy has breathed on in his cradle can get a kick out of the crush of human immersion. Only the one with a knack for cross-dressing and masquerade. Only the one who hated his home. Multitude, solitude, these are equal, reciprocal terms for the fecund poet. Unless he knows how to welcome invisible guests to his solitary musings, he cannot walk untroubled through the busy streets. The poet can be at once himself and another, Like a wandering soul in search of a body, he can enter at will any person's emotions. For him alone, every door is open, and if some seem closed, they aren't worth his time. Solitary walker, solitary thinker, he gets drunk on solidarity. The crowd's embrace is for him a joy, denied forever to the egoist in his walking coffin, the mollusk man in his giant shell. The love men speak of is tiny, feeble, stifling compared to this indescribable orgy, this saintly prostitution of the soul, giving herself completely, poetry and charity, to the unexpected happening, the stranger passing by. Teach the so-called winners of this world, if only to bring their stupid pride down a notch. There's a happiness greater than theirs and sweeter. The poet must sometimes laugh at the ones who deplore his patchy career, chaste life. And then the last poem, called The Vacuum Cleaner. I'd almost finished the vacuuming when the on-off switch that had been wonky for months finally broke. I couldn't turn the machine off. It was stuck on. So I finished vacuuming and unplugged it. Next week I took it into the shop. A beautiful girl came out from in back. I handed her the vacuum cleaner, the power head that is, the attachments I'd left at home. And as she inspected it, we began to talk in a friendly way about what I don't remember, but I recall feeling that I was not just a customer to her. The beauty of girls and boys pursues me wherever I'm going. Then I had to take my head into the clinic. I sat in the examining room waiting for the door to open. Then it did. The young doctor entered and said, "I'm Jason."
Thank you, George. You guys are an awesome audience. Don't you love the murmurations from the audience? Very good. Very nice. Sharon Thesen is a poet and editor and professor emerita of creative writing at the University of British Columbia, Okanagan. Her research interests include American mid-century and projectivist poetics and the Canadian long poem. She has published 9 books of poetry, most recently Oyama Pink Shale, The Good Bacteria, and A Pair of Scissors. She has edited 2 editions of the new long poem Anthology, as well as the award-winning selected poems of Phyllis Webb, one of my favorite books, The Vision Tree. At UBC Okanagan, she co-edited Lake, A Journal of Arts and Environment. Please welcome Sharon Thesen.
Thank you. And I am also in sympathy and would like to dedicate this portion of the evening, of my reading anyway, to Peter Culley, to his heart and his skills. Okay, so I'm going to begin with a found poem. It's verbatim from the Kelowna Courier, January 2011. I titled it, "I Was the Fifth Car Back." I cannot for the life of me see why this has been this way so long. Why do only certain traffic lights have the left turn signals on the busiest, most used road in Kelowna? The traffic lights on those crossings with the directional lights are not long enough. Timing them, I find the majority are 4 to 6 seconds, with 3 to 4 seconds on amber. In this short window, 4 cars at most can turn left, and 2 can turn on the amber. The number that turn on red only proves the green light is not long enough for the amount of traffic wanting to turn. Is it that difficult to see? How many times have I sat in my car at Spall and Harvey, no directional green arrow, 6th car back, and had to wait another 3 minutes to catch the light? How many times have I sat fuming when the directional light turns green and the car or 2 in front of me wastes 2 or 3 seconds getting the button here? Sitting at Dilworth and Harvey recently, waiting to turn left toward the lake, there was no green arrow. I was the 5th car back. So much traffic was coming towards us from across the highway, the light turned red before the car in front of me could move. So I sat, waiting for the next green light. The light was amber before it was clear for me to turn, knowing 4 more followed me. Talk about polluting the valley with cars idling, waiting for these foolish lights to change. If nothing changes and they bring in this red light law, it is a cash cow for the city, because we are all guilty of doing this, and we will continue, I'm sure. It's human nature. Wayne Harris, author of poet of that poem. I'm going to read a poem that was published in the beautiful Anthology. This is called The Fishing Trip, and introduces an image that has been occurring for a long time in my writing, the image of Dogfish Woman from Haida mythology. This bracelet I'm wearing was given me by my great uncle, who lived on the Queen Charlotte's. My mom grew up there. I have quite a connection with this image, so you'll hear references to her in the next couple of poems. This is called The Fishing Trip. Speedometer rising on a flat, straight stretch of Highway 16. Crowded together lodgepole pines, either side whiz by, the two-tone Olds 98, windy and back. Dad adjusts the no draft, and Dogfish Woman adjusts her crown of a shark's grin and fin, tarp humping the roof where lay the great blue tent, and hammers and pins to raise it, big top of summer, in whose gloom we blew up air mattresses, dusty odor of rubber and sharp rings of the brass nipple by the Kispioks, where dogfish swam and prized sockeye wriggled at the ends of poles and lines, tourists filling ice chests with silver bodies of fish, filleting them with sharp tools. At dusk, the frying pan, the sizzle above the blue flame of the propane element. Fairy blue, uneven blue, hyacinth. This is called Another Poem for My Mother. And I've mentioned the Masset and Haida Gwaii, Queen Charlotte's, as she called it then, connection, and also the fact that my mother came down with tuberculosis and was spent some time at the Tranquille Sanatorium, which is outside of Kamloops. So this is another poem for my mother. For the required length of time, I stayed treading water, the waters of life, amniotic, ancestral, living close to old Masset in my mother's body. Scared with her friend to go look in the trees where Haida had interred their dead, it was said, along with their jewels, bracelets, and combs. Or on the bobolink, taking supplies to Langara Island and the long-bearded fishermen who lashed whales as ballast to the sides of their boats. On the barge, we floated past dead towns of a northern jungle. Do you love me, dogfish mother? Whose eye, whose tooth implanted in your fin? Your grin a gate of knives, your crown 2 long beak birds, your sad face at the end of a line. Billows and tides, storms, depths, surfaces always in motion, always changing, and she, a fish out of water in the broiling interior hinterland of Tronquil Sanatorium at age 27. What is nature? Where is mother? Who is Sue Halpern, for that matter? Did she not write a book? A book oft cited at Davos, formerly Berghof Schatzalp Sanatorium, highest of the sanatoriums. So high that in winter they had to bring the dead down the mountain on bobsleds. At Davos, where annually they try to save the world from climate change and inequality. 2. A limpid, decadent warmth in Davos in the summertime, where consumptives once lightly fried on the verandas of the Berghof Schatzalp. The magic mountain of Thomas Mann's imagination and lived in dreams and numerologies, where time was not time, but a thing. And to be there was to be a character in an opera or a ballet in which a patient might take the role of the faun in Afternoon of a Faun. A patient who'd only come to visit someone, he forgets who now, but here he is himself instead. Such is the swiftness and invisibility of contagion. In this trapped condition on the mountain, where the patients must fall in love eventually with each other or the doctor, as we do in prisons, work camps, spaceships, schools, convents, labs, offices, outposts, boats, due to proximity and a quasi-domestic dailiness, and which must be forbidden or managed, or not managed at all, through the boredom of the rest cure, or the throes of the toxic side effects of the gold cure, because gold's atoms are tightly linked, and it is difficult to force them past each other. And I'll finish with this poem, a dream poem I'm indebted to the poetry of Charles Olson for emboldening dream poems and poems about dreams and the information they carry. This is called The Receiver. In a dream the other night, I was on the phone, one of those rotary dial black desk phones, and looking out the window. A window you lift up from the bottom to stick your head outside to a nighttime scene, as in Jean Cocteau's The Human Voice. Ingrid Bergman's lover in the phone booth out on the street where cars pass in the rain. It takes him a while to dial. Coins pushed into the slot. The Human Voice is a one-woman show, all her side of the conversation, but I don't remember anything she actually says. There is a lot of murmuring, perhaps some pleading, some pushback. She's lying on the bed crying. They'd hang up, then the phone would ring once more. She'd lean into the receiver, her beautiful voice and mouth and breaking heart. I imagine the receiver holding the whole story inside. In my heart, a dream once presided of respite, and within that dream, the small silver key to unlock it. Respite from worries, from pleading with fate. But, as Camus insists, Sisyphus was happy, bound only to his fate and nothing else. I imagine Sisyphus glancing outward at the top of his effort to check which constellation shone upon him then, whose story fixed its fixed eye upon him. Condemned for what? I wonder. I should Google the myth of Sisyphus. And while I'm at it, the myth of this and the myth of that. People lying on the beach will tend to murmur but seldom converse. Albert Camus, author of The Stranger, Revolt, The Plague, The Myth of Sisyphus, and Summer in Algiers, says the sun is God, that we have exiled beauty, and that the body is happiest in sunshine, in a sea blue and sun yellow world. Other worlds have their charms and attractions, more nuanced and even more hopeful than the mere tans of others just off the plain from Cabo San Lucas or Honolulu. How would we know they were happy, we might ask? A tan. It was one of those rotary dial phones that sat on a credenza, the kind you always answered. These phones rang in Hollywood movies for many, many years. A dame in an evening gown would stride over, pick up the receiver, say hello, and glare at the fellow holding her ermine stole. It will be a while before everything is sorted out, and this is why it's a story. There would be whirlwinds of emotion, such as someone might feel returning from the plunge pools of Puerto Vallarta to the chilly rays of March and testamental trees' fretful, cursive branches, in which an owl might sit saying, "Hoo, hoo, hoo," and you would say, "Who, me?" And it would say, "Yes, you." You might wind up playing a role you only dreamed of, such as being a human voice in a telephone receiver, the kind you had to lift out of what was called the cradle, and replace afterwards in the cradle's prongs. When it rang again with a sharp European ring, she knew it would be him. She knew it would be eternal. So she lifted the receiver once more. Thank you very much.
And that was Sharon Thesen. Thank you so much. That concludes our reading. I think the reading has shown us that poetry is important and matters, that it connects us, that it helps us to mourn and to remember and to celebrate. So thank you very much to the readers and to the wonderful audience. Let's give Ursula, don't leave. Sit back down. Sit back down, please, ma'am. Keeping my eye on you all evening. So before Ursula leaves, let's please give a hand to the audience and the readers again. Often publishers are the quiet people behind the scenes, doing a lot of organizing and emailing each and every of the 89 poets in the book to have them check their proof. And then emailing them again, oops, you forgot your bio, or oops, did you mean this? So Ursula, I've got you a small bouquet of flowers to thank you for the wonderful work. Please come here so we can celebrate you.
And I just wanted to say how much I enjoyed this evening, because one of the great gifts that the publisher has is sitting in the audience, hearing the words spoken out loud and seeing those words register on the faces of the audience. I live for those moments, and it's just, it makes all of the hard work worthwhile. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You can go now if you have to. Ursula will be selling books. The books cost $30, and beginning at 10:30. So you don't have to run away from here. You can relax a little bit and chat. But at 10:30 at the Globe Bar and Grill, which in my memory was a strip bar, apparently isn't anymore. There will be the Marmot Cascadia spoken word bout. I have been housing this marmot for several months, and tonight someone else will take it home. So the marmot goes to the winner of the marmot bout. Isn't he lovely? Yeah. His name is Henry. So thank you very much, everyone, and hope to see you at the Globe.